Are you the keymaster? Welcome back to another episode of DEStalks. I am joined here with Anthony Knopps today. I am so excited to have you with me. Good morning.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, Anthony, you are a professor at several universities I saw here. You are currently an adjunct professor at Adrian. You are also a professor at the George Washington University. You're a TEDx speaker. You're author of several books. You're a media consultant. I mean, what do you not touch?
Well, I've never won a Super Bowl or World Series. My daughter did play college basketball, but all I did was get splinters from sitting on the bleachers all those years. So there's still goals to be had.
Still goals to be had. Well, I love that. So you and I were actually brought together through a mutual friend that we actually had on, Navy Bob, back in January here on DEStalks. He was bringing his new book and we were talking to him about that. I would love to talk to you about your new books that you have out. I have read your My Daddy Has a Headache. I loved it. I think it's awesome. And thank you so much for writing that. I think that is very needed as a veteran. My brother and I love that you were bringing awareness to that. You also wrote No Fail Mission, which is an amazing book. I'm currently reading through that. And then another book that came out recently here in March, The Rufus Rules. So can you talk to us a little bit about, I want to start with the No Fail Mission, if that's okay. And can you kind of talk to us about what No Fail Mission is and why you felt the call to write?
Yeah, absolutely. No Fail Mission, kind of a labor of love. A colleague of mine at GW asked me to write this story because he said that, to be honest, somebody, and it's kind of embarrassing to me because somebody in Washington, as I have been for a number of years, who worked as a journalist, a working journalist in D.C., I had never heard of the Presidential Service Badge, and it turns out I'm not alone. It is one of the most distinguished military honors that nobody knows about. It's given to servicemen and women for meritorious service to the office of the president. The president defines what that is. It was established by Lyndon Johnson. It really, the common thread in this is the humility of the service members who earn the badge. It is, as the title implies, no fail mission. You can't fail. If you fail, the whole planet knows about it.
Right.
And we know, particularly those of us who work in the military, so many things are done in the shadows that the public never sees. And these are things that are done to protect the safety, security, sanctity of the country. And sometimes they're serious in nature. Sometimes they're a little lighter. Such as when the president leaves his briefing book on the plane, you have to go back to the airport and back to Air Force One to go get it, because obviously if you're the president and you're having a high level meeting, you need to have that book because you can't really and
got to have your brain with you, right?
And that is one of the stories in the book. The No Fail Mission is somebody, the president left the briefing book on the plane, and they had to go through the streets of New Delhi to go get it. And anybody that knows New Delhi well, it's very congested. And they got back to the airport, no problem. They come back, and between where they are and the hotel is a rather lengthy traffic jam / accident / whatever. And the New Delhi security forces go, follow us. And they went down through a hole in the fence between the northbound and southbound.
Wow.
And so they're going facing oncoming traffic on these little scooters, bringing the president the briefing book back. And it's one of those where, you walk into the room and here you go, sir. And nobody knows. So you've got those kind of interesting stories, but you've also got really heart-wrenching stories, such as when one of the members of the president's detail who grew up in Boston was asked if she wanted to go with the president to Boston after the marathon bombing. And, you know, she did. And it was a very emotional event. And, she's like, I wore my glasses inside the church so nobody could see me cry.
Wow.
And to be able to touch that sense of duty, honor, country is profound for me, because I knew those people were there, but I didn't know to the level of we're not doing this for ourselves. We're not
Right.
doing this for party. We're doing this for the country. And I think when this book came out last year, it was in the middle of the campaign, which is one of the more challenging campaigns that we've seen in this country. So it was a message that I think resonated in an unexpected way,
Yeah.
because it taught us and all the people that read it, and really it renewed what I felt was still there, that there are people that are there doing it not for personal gain, but for the country. And
Right.
I was very humbled. In the April edition of Army Magazine, Colonel Cole Kingseed did a review of the book, and he, I'll just paraphrase his last line because I think it really resonates with what the core lesson in the book is. And he said that the recipients who share their personal stories of the No Fail mission are men and women of strong character and ethical foundations. We are in the author's debt for making these stories accessible to the American public.
Oh, that's a powerful statement. I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, these are men and women that have, through their service to our country, they haven't stood up and bragged about this. I mean, this is one of the lesser known but very heavy, having a presidential service badge is incredible. I mean, there's only been, I mean, you said how many given out so far?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of all those who have served the military since Eisenhower, so you're
Right.
dealing with thousands of men and women. And then you think of the very small subset of folks that were posted to the White House. So you have this number, then you have a very small number, and then an even smaller number that have earned the service badge. It's a rare thing. And I think if you walk down the streets of DC and you ask 100 people what their presidential service badge was, you get maybe one, two people that got it. And I think that's the common thread is these people who earn it. They're like, but I didn't do. You know, I didn't do all that. Bob did more, or Jerry did more, or Sue did more. And I think that's really the heart of the underlying kernel of all this is they don't do it for the recognition. Therefore, nobody knows what the badge is. So, and I think that's what's really, really humbling about it. And when I was talking with my colleague about writing this, I said, uh, I want this to create some kind of avenue that gives back. And I think that's really important. And to his credit, he's created the Presidential Service Badge Foundation, so usbfoundation.org. And its focus is on education and on service. And the proceeds from this book go to the foundation's academic scholarship fund. So we know, and I found this out from the people that were in the book that have told me they wouldn't have been able to do what they do. They wouldn't have been able to serve the president with distinction had they worried about who's taking their kid to soccer practice, who's
That's
taking
right.
it to prom. How are they getting the cookies for the bake sale? So to be able to give back, not necessarily to the service members involved, but to their families, really, really kind of brings this full circle. And I think that's more important than anything else. I wrote a check to the foundation from the first quarter sales this year, and it was humbling.
That's so exciting. I bet it was humbling. I could only imagine being able to write a check to a foundation that does such great things. I mean, and especially, I mean, I love the fact that you're bringing light. I've said this for years. I know my brother and I, Rob, both say this a lot. We could not have served our country without having a strong support system behind us. Before we got married to our wives, we had our parents, we had our brother, and then as soon as we got married, we had our wives. Rob and I both, like you said, didn't worry about when dinner was going to be put on the table, whether we're going to have clean clothes, because we had a good support system that allowed us to be successful. And that is such a key. And I don't feel like our spouses get enough. That support system gets enough recognition, and I'm glad to hear people say that. Especially with the presidential service badge. I mean, you don't get that, without having a good support system and making those good decisions. To have that support and allowing people to support you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the foundation was started in 2024, so they're building up, and they're hoping to, in the not in this academic year 25-26, but in the 26-27, be able to uh, start awarding scholarships to those kids, or even to spouses. And I think um, you know what's cool about this is you'll never know the impact uh, that you have on a life, but you're changing trajectories for people, and how cool is that?
That's amazing.
And even if somebody just reads it and thinks twice about service, goes, I want to be one of those people. What kind of impact that has, and that's humbling, and that's really why an author does that, because they want their stories to have meaning. I mean, I've been a storyteller for a long long time. I won't date myself, but to have stories like that, and working on the second one, when we did the book launch at the Army Navy Club back in July, there was some folks from the White House, and they were like, "This looks like a 10-volume edition," and I'm like, "Okay, well, there's one. We're working on this, but working on the second one, and the goal of the second one, and if you allow me a shameless plug, I'm trying to find
Absolutely.
the older badge holders pass on, because this is something that was started, in the Eisenhower era.
Right.
To be able to find those people, are so important. That is, I was blessed to talk to a service member who earned the service badge. I only found him because he wrote a review on Amazon about the book. This is great, but we should talk to some older badge holders. And it took me 3 months to find him, with the assistance of the family of the former Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Wow.
And we found him in a retirement home in Texas. And he's like, "Well, it's about time somebody came and talked to me." And he was one of the folks that helped facilitate Kennedy's trip to Europe in the summer of '63.
Wow.
He was with Johnson in November of '63. I have a picture of him on Army One, not Marine One, because it wasn't Marine One yet. It was Army One, taking the Johnsons back to the White House, and you see him in the window saluting the new president.
Wow.
And I said, "I'm happy to give you those photos back." He's like, "Nah, nah, I'm okay. I got plenty of junk."
Oh, wow.
And so those photos are going to the White House Historical Association, so that people will be able to relish that moment in history, because it was such a tumultuous era. And he worked for Johnson, and I asked him if he had any regrets, and he said the only regret that he has is he's in his 90s now, wonderful gentleman. He said that he had a book that Eisenhower autographed for him, one of the trips that he flew Eisenhower back home, and it was a book that Eisenhower autographed, and he misplaced it while serving abroad. And he said,
Yeah.
only regret.
Wow.
Just an amazing story. And yeah, so I've got him. I've got another gentleman that worked for an earlier administration. So if we can find those stories, just like with the service members who stormed Normandy,
Oh, yeah.
or those stories are disappearing. The more we can get them and get them into print and into video, I think the better off we're going to be.
Well, absolutely. It humanizes the event, right? It's one thing to read about it in a text, in a text, or nowadays, I guess you read about it,
Sure.
online. You're reading about it, but to get those personal stories, to be able to go to the historical society there and read those personal details of what it actually was like from a firsthand point of view, can give you a whole new perspective, on what it took, storming those beaches or serving the president. I mean, oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine one of the most active people in the nation, in the world, and you are there serving the president, and then to get a service badge to serving the president. I want to hear your story. Like,
And,
what did you do, to earn that badge? Well, you make it sound like you just flew a plane. I know you did more than fly that plane, sir.
and when somebody tells you, "Well, I didn't do much," no, I think you did. You know, it's just amazing the humility, and I think those who serve recognize it, and if we can share that humility with the broader audience here, maybe it forces, force is probably the wrong word, but it encourages people of opposite beliefs to at least listen to the other side. In my classes, I purposely have people take contrarian positions because the more you understand the other side, the better off you're going to be. And I think it's so easy to go, well, they don't know what you're talking about. Either way, and I think the more that we can break down those barriers and tell people, yeah, you can disagree, but you don't have to be disagreeable. And the military is a great balancer of that. You can have you can have people of various political positions in the same foxhole as you,
In the same foxhole.
and you relying on them to get home. And I think that's a message that comes across the humility of these men and women. It was an honor to write it and to continue writing it. So.
Well, we're excited. I hope this does become a 10 volume edition. I feel like more of this needs to be out there. I do kind of want to shift gears on you, Anthony. Personally, I said it earlier, My Daddy Has a Headache is one of my favorite books that you've written because it is directly applicable to me. I have suffered and recovered from PTSD. I deal with it every day, in my family, and your book couches it in a way that it's understandable not only to us adults, I feel like, who don't really understand what it is. It's not just something that veterans get. I mean, we all can have versions of this and it looks different. And I just love the way that you couch this to be able to understand what kind of brought this to the light that made you want to write a book like this.
Well, it's twofold. First of all, obviously working with military charities and the like, what I found, that there are so many service members that are returning, thanks to the advances in medicine, where years ago they wouldn't have they wouldn't have left the battlefield, they would have died there. Now they're returning, and a lot of them, an increasing number, are coming home with traumatic brain injuries. I didn't know what a TBI was until about 5 years ago when I sustained one. My son and I were about a mile from our house, and we were struck by a distracted driver, and it was in one of those accidents where people are like, "You walked away from that," and we were like, "Yeah," and it was troubling because you go to the hospital, you get checked out, and they go, well, you look fine.
Yeah.
And
Everything they could screen for in that moment, you seem to be doing okay.
everything was fine. And to his credit, my son didn't have any adverse impacts from this. I actually was giving a seminar to the Vietnamese Politburo about 6 weeks after the accident, and I got home and nothing worked. And I told my wife that something's not right, but it's probably just I'm just tired. And throughout the evening, it got progressively worse to the point where it was like, you're going to the hospital. And in typical guy fashion, I went, no, I'm okay. And because that's what guys do.
Yeah. If I still don't feel this way in the morning, we'll talk about it. I've had that conversation a lot.
And he's like, no, get your butt in the car. And we went to the hospital down the road, and then we went. They were they did the intake, and they looked at me, and I have vague recollections of that night, but
Yeah.
and then I was on my way to the level 1 trauma center, and on the table in a couple hours, I remember going into the operating room, and this person I can only assume was the anesthesiologist going, "Do you want to be awake for this?" Yeah. And I woke up, a couple days later in the ICU, and there was a football game on, so it was okay.
Yeah.
It's a football game, and I was like, well, "What just happened?" And it turns out that in the 6 weeks between when the accident happened and when I went to the ER, the blood had pooled in my brain in such a way that had I gone to bed that night, I wouldn't have seen the dawn. And as a reporter, they tell you never Google what you have, but I did.
Of course. You're
Uh,
only human, Anthony.
I think I understood. And I had the entry that I had a 78% mortality rate. And, so that's one reason why I do what I do now, because tomorrow is not guaranteed. And that was the driver behind My Daddy Has a Headache, because I'm like, how can you, as a storyteller, I wanted to see if I could still tell a story after an accident like this, because it did take time to recreate, and sometimes I still have a challenge pulling out words from here and there. But this story really grew out of the conversations I had with my medical folks about the challenging nature of TBI and how to talk to young kids about them, because it's one thing if you're dealing with it, but imagine coming home to a 6-year-old. How do you relate that story to them? What do you do? And so it was a chance to take a situation and then make a difference. And what is cool about this is the illustrator that I found, obviously through my academic connections, is a TBI patient herself. She had an accident in Thanksgiving break during her first semester in college.
Wow.
Sustained a TBI, and she was like, "Yeah, let's do this." And she brought Tommy to life. And obviously, you gotta love a kid who all he wants to do is play catch with his dad, and we all can relate to that.
We can all relate to that.
We can all and so we said, okay, we're going to do this. How are we going to? Because we don't want to profit off of this, because it's not appropriate. So we found a charity that deals with how to talk to families about their soldiers returning. They help to onboard families, because you can onboard, recalibrate soldiers to civilian life, but recalibrating families of soldiers, bringing them back in is almost as challenging.
It's just as important. It's just as important. And I feel like that gets overshadowed a lot, Anthony. I'm so glad to hear that there's some charity out there. And remind us, where is that? Where can we find that?
It's Blue Skies, and it's based in Ohio, and it's just a fantastic group. When because I asked a friend of mine who is in that space, I said, I need a charity. And she's like, oh, these, boom, it was just like that. So that shows you the impact that they have, but the impact that we also have. And the illustrator Julie Corbin and I are working now. She's actually doing the final illustrations for the a sequel is not the right word for this, but for a companion story for My Daddy Has a Headache, which we're hoping to have out on Veterans Day, which is
Awesome.
My Daddy Isn't Coming Home.
Wow.
And working with I worked with a psychologist to get the language just so, because it is such a horrific event when the soldier doesn't make it home.
Absolutely.
How do you talk to your kids about that, and how to get the right messaging across, because this is bad, but this is challenging, and this My Daddy Isn't Coming Home is even more so. The former Secretary of the Navy took a special interest in My Daddy Has a Headache. So, and with his connections, we're hoping to, get the word out, that it's an issue that's important. It's an
It
issue
is.
that,
Well, and it shouldn't be a taboo subject. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about it because those people that are impacted need to have a support system, like we talked about earlier. Need to have a support system, and we're here to support you.
right. It's, there are no good ways to say it, but there are also no bad ways to say it, if that makes any sense. But how do you message it in such a way that creates a balance that it's going to be okay? Because you want it to be, what opportunities are going to come out of this to help children. And I think that's one reason why Navy Bob and we're kind of in the same orbit. We're trying to take the lessons that we've learned throughout our career and add to it to create some more avenues to facilitate understanding, because I think the more we do that, I think the better off we are as a society.
I agree with
I'm
that.
just
I
a
agree
guy
with
that
that.
points the way. I'm not there's no heavy lifting here. It's just we need to talk about this, so let's talk about it.
Well, I love that you are bringing light to that. I love that you just tied your journey along with Navy Bob, because obviously he has his leading with love revolution that he is leading right now on his front, and I think this absolutely ties in with that. And I think that you are leading in the right direction personally, and I love to see that we have people like yourself who are willing to take on those tough subjects and actually start a conversation around those subjects, because it's like I said, it needs to be talked about. This should not be hidden in a cupboard, and something to be shameful about. Our TBI is something that we all deal with, and it is prevalently high in our military members and our veterans, but it is something that we all deal with. This is something that can be couched in a way that your books, the book My Daddy Has a Headache, can be couched in a way that there's something in there for everybody, and
Right.
I love that.
And the deeper I get into that space, the more I realize that hidden disabilities are so prevalent among people. Would you hire somebody with a broken arm? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Because I talk to CEOs about this. Would you hire somebody with a broken arm, or would you hire somebody with a broken leg? No question. Would you hire somebody with a traumatic brain injury? And they step back, and they're like, I said, would you
right.
believe you're talking to somebody with one? And then they're just like, it doesn't register. And it's like, well, yeah, you are. So it's those opportunities. If we can create understanding that it's a disability, it's a hidden disability, but it's not a disqualifying disability. And I do some work with I have a dear friend who's a children's author, and she has a hidden disability too. You wouldn't think of, you look at her and go, she's got it. She's got all the, well, yeah, but what you don't know is X. And
What you don't see is the feet underneath the water of the duck. All you see is the ducks resting on the water. What you don't see is underneath.
Yes, or see how big the iceberg is, right? Yeah. So it's that understanding that I think we need, because you can have all these one-to-one conversations, but they're just that. They're one-to-one, and so use a book. People still read books to get that message out, and I think when people read My Daddy Has a Headache, when they read, but we only have one grave, they read, I Want a Book About Me. It's not just the lessons that the kids, the receivers, are getting, but it's also the lessons that the caregiver, the parent, the brother, the sister are reading, where they go, wow, I didn't know that. Maybe I should learn more about that so I can better understand what that is, and, you know, uh, so that's kind of the space I'm living in right now. I wrote, but we only have one grape, about food insecurity, about how big a problem that is, even in this country. 1 in 6 kids are food insecure. I wrote, I Want a Book About Me. My daughter inspired that. She came home from break one term and said, "You write all these books, but you don't write a book about me." And I said, "What you say?" And she goes, "I want a book about me." So this is about a young girl whose mom works in the Library of Congress, and she's surrounded by all these books, but not a book about me. And it's a lesson in how not to be selfish. So so a little whimsy there, but it's still important, and I gave it to my daughter on her birthday. She's graduated and she's working for a nonprofit in Minnesota now, but
Let's say she's not a little girl anymore.
still beat me on the dribble, I bet. But she's just, she's a good kid, and it's really humbling to see what those things, those decisions that you make, and hopefully you make the right ones. There's no guarantees, but
Well, there's new opportunities every day. I'm living proof of that. I know you are as well, Anthony. Being able to walk away from some of the decisions that you've made and being able to recover. I'm sure you don't get to where you are by making all the right decisions, right? There's
nope,
life lessons along the way.
no, but they always lead you to where you're supposed to be. Yeah,
Absolutely.
sometimes the best decisions are the ones you don't make. So
Anthony, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on DEStalks today and having a conversation with me. It has been absolutely wonderful. If you are out there, as you are listening, make sure that you go check out his website at Anthony Knopps .com and check out his books there. We are so excited to have you on. Hopefully, I can get you back on when your new book comes out around Veterans Day. Thank you so much for being here with us.
oh, happy to do so, and thank you for the opportunity to chat and to share these stories that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, as always, Desk Talkers, make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe button for more. We'll catch you on the next one.